This is a quick demo of the latest version of Polar. Polar is a personal knowledge repository for managing all your books, white papers, technical documents, and other web content. It's focused around students, researchers, and PhDs and academics who have a massive amount of content that they need to manage. It's inspired by incremental reading, spaced repetition, and integrated development environments. So as a programmer, I spend a lot of time in my IDE, my integrated development environment. It allows me to keep all of the source code files that I'm working on, easily jump between them, do things like refactoring, changing things, jumping around, reverse, jumping to a specific symbol, so I can jump here. And I spent a lot of time in my integrated development environment, and I also spent a lot of time reading. And what I wanted is an integrated development environment for reading. So I started working on Polar. And Polar essentially allows you to keep everything in one place and sync those annotations with Anki in your mobile device. So it has an elegant sync API, so that in the future we could add support for other systems, but right now Anki is the main one that we support. Polar is powered by Electron, so it's always up to date with the latest web standards. We support all platforms, including Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. So when you first start up Polar, you're given this really nice document repository. So this is the initial view. It allows you to see all of your documents in one place. It supports both PDF and web content. So PDF support is essentially first class, and it's powered by PDF.js, which is a project created by Mozilla. Web content is supported by a capture process, and I'll discuss that in a moment. But what it does is it takes the full HTML pages and then stores it in a local cache so that it preserves the local content so that you can keep your annotations alongside the original content. This way, if the content changes, you still get to keep you can still get to keep your annotations. The document repository is very flexible. It allows you to do things like flagging, so I can flag individual documents, and then I can hide and show them based on whether they're flagged. So I have a bunch of documents in my repository. You can page through them, but most of the time I hide I hide everything except the flag, and I can also archive them. So I can hide and show archive status, and you can just flip this archive status bit by clicking that button on the left. It also allows you to sort by the time that was added to the repository and the progress of your reading. So the progress is driven by the incremental reading system, and I'll talk about that in a second. But this way you can quickly suspend and resume reading. You don't have to worry about if you only have 15 minutes to read something that's very long. You can just make progress on it and come back to it in a month and then pick up right where you left off. And once you've figured out which document you want to edit, you can just double click on it directly in the user interface and it's opened. And this is just a demo document showing how to work with Polar directly. This is basically the Bitcoin white paper. And then so in order to keep track of what you're reading, we've implemented this concept called page marks. So page marks allow you to open up a document, read selected portions of it, read subsections of it, and then close it out, and then come back potentially months later and figure out where you've left off. It's basically the idea that you should be able to suspend and resume a document that you've read. Now, while many ebook platforms support this sort of a simple resume functionality, they don't support high granularity, so you can't just do specific pages. You are generally given a pointer, and that pointer sort of moves forward. But that doesn't really work within technical documents, especially when you're reading a book on something that you might already understand very well, but you're trying to refresh. You might even just skip 70% of the document, only read sort of the new chapters. And this way you can mark which sections of the document you've read. Now, the page marks are pretty easy to work with. This blue thing is a page mark. So this whole page has been marked blue. And to work with them, you can work with the keyboard. So it supports integration through the keyboard. And then you can actually just drag this keyboard as the document is updating. Now, if you notice up here at the top, the progress actually changes. So as you're updating the page mark, the progress changes. It also changes in the repository too. So if I dragged it over there, watch that, and that should change. Yes, it changed slightly, but let's just clear that whole page, and we can really easily hide and show specific individual pages, and then jump within the document. Now notice you can, on the sidebar, you can scroll the whole document, and this progress up at the top doesn't change because you haven't been changing the page mark. Now you can also drag and resize the page mark just by using the mouse, which is pretty easy, but honestly most of the time I just use the page mark. We also support a complex annotation system. So we support area highlights and text highlights. So for the text highlight, I'm just going to delete this one and I'll just recreate one. Yeah, just recreate another text highlight. So let's just say I wanted to highlight that whole paragraph. Just select it. It's all keyboard navigation for right now. So you can just right click on that and that whole section is highlighted. Now also let's say this this figure right up here is something that we also want to highlight. We can just right click and do an area highlight. That brings up this little box. We can then take this box and just drag it over what we want to highlight, and then we can just easily resize that, and now that's highlighted. And then all of that data is actually persisted to the local disk every time you save, so you don't have to worry about losing your highlights. And then when you edit and come back into this document, excuse me, let's just double close it and then double click it, it'll keeps and resumes and and reloads all the highlights so that you know exactly where you've left off. Now, one of the important things in Polar is that we support the concept of spaced repetition. So spaced repetition is the idea that you can create flashcards, sync them with your phone or mobile device, and then review the important things you want to keep. So part of the problem is with learning things long term, especially technical concepts, that material can just kind of fade. So spaced repetition allows you to through timed repetition, retrain what you want to remember, so you don't lose anything. And in Polar, what we do is right now we support Anki, and we support a sync mechanism with Anki. Anki is a spaced repetition system. There's a bunch of them. Quizlet is another one, but I think Anki's pretty good. And ideally, we would like to support all of them, but right now we just support Anki. And in order to create a flashcard, you can just right-click on any of the annotations, so area highlights and text highlights, and then you just add a flashcard. And I'm just going to create a simple, this is a test. Now, the cool thing about flashcards is that we support a really high-quality text editor, so we can actually create screenshots in there. So it's a screenshot, and I'm going to paste that. So that's just actually an image. And then, since I'm a programmer and I spend a lot of time in my editor, we actually support rich text. So if you copy that as text and then go back to Polar and paste it, this is actually text. So you can go in here and edit it, and it actually retains the formatting. So when you actually sync that to Anki, it will actually retain all the images and all the rich text formatting. So you don't actually lose any of that when you review the flashcard. So I'm just going to submit that, and that's saved. And then in order to sync that, I just go up into here and sync it, and then it updates with Anki, and all the data is in Anki right now. So that is a really easy way to create your flashcards, because this way you're actually doing it within your IDE. You're not actually going back and forth between apps and trying to create the flashcards, copying. It's all integrated. In fact, the two last features that I need for Polar to be feature complete for our 1.0 are to screenshot automatically, so that way when you do create a flashcard, you get a screenshot of the text that you highlighted as well as the original text, so that you can go back to the original text when you're working with the highlight. And then I'm also going to put a sidebar here, so that way as you're working with the document, you can actually just scroll through your annotations and jump to them and double click on them and work with them in line without having to page through the whole document, because if you have 300 pages, there might only be a small subsection of the annotations. So the problem is that PDF is only one part of the solution. The difficulty I found, and I originally implemented this just on PDF, the problem that I found was with PDF, many documents aren't designed to be read as PDF. And specifically, this is web content. So what I did was I implemented this new feature called capture support. So capturing a web page is basically keeping a mirrored copy of it. And what we do is we take all the resources like the images and the HTML and we store it in a bundle and we store it on disk so that you always have it available. So this is the Capture app, and it basically sort of mimics a web browser. So I'm just going to load this document on from Wikipedia. It's a document about the blockchain, and you can see it's pretty long. And once it's loaded and I think that it looks pretty good, I can just click this capture button on the top right, and it captured it. So that's done. Whoops, internal error. I don't know what that's about. We'll just pretend it's still beta. It's still beta. So don't give me too. Actually, it looked like it worked. So I'm not sure what's happening. But this essentially allows you to view the document and work with it. Oh, I think it's probably because I had the document already indexed. So anyway, it allows you to view the document. Then you can go through and you can create annotations for it and work with it just like you can a normal PDF document. And one of the great things about capturing content is it works just like a mobile device. So let's just pick a news site. I'm just going to pick BBC. And then one of the great things about this is that many news sites will basically work very well with tablet devices. So if you have a long news article, it will actually be formatted very well for tablet devices, which is nice for reading a document, especially a very long document. So that's what it looks like on the web. In Capture, it would look like this. So this is probably a bad example because this document is actually formatted very well. And the nice thing about Polar is that documents should be viewed as documents. So when we capture a page, we emulate this mobile device, essentially mimicking an iPad. And we also support features like loading the document through accelerated mobile pages, if possible, and other mobile technology, so that way the document and all the navigation sidebar and things are removed, so it looks much crisper. So we're very close to moving towards a 1.0. I think we have these two last features, and that was the annotations sidebar I was talking about, as well as screenshotting your annotations while you take them. That way it's fully compatible with Anki when you sync to it. So once you sync your documents to it, you'll have the original intent of the document. And my background goal is that this way you can spend all your time at the computer sort of ingesting data and taking it in and marking it up so that way it can be consumed while you're mobile. And this way, when you're mobile and you're at the gym or at the DMV, you can retain all that information. Now, we have a Discord group, which I will link to below. So if you'd like to comment or if you have any feedback on Polar, I'd love to get your feedback. And please take a look at the latest version. We're sort of in the late beta stages, so it's pretty stable, and we would love for you to play with it. Thank you.